Well, welcome you all. Thank you very much for being here, and congrats to Bill, Sherry Gretsch, the team for putting together such a fabulous morning and afternoon session. Start with Dr. Marty Makary. It's great to have you here. Thank you, our inaugural guest. You come to this position at the FDA in a fascinating place because you were on the outside looking at the FDA for a long time, at times critical of it and thoughtful of it, and now for 100 days you've been inside of it, looking under the hood. What has surprised you the most?
Well, I would say, first of all, it's great to be here, and thanks for having me. And it's great to see some folks here that I recognize. I would say that the biggest surprise is that you can get things done. It's difficult to work within government, but the FDA has a very impressive staff. They have a history and tradition of following the science, and so we have brought in a number of top scientists with impeccable credentials. I've been very impressed with the scientists that are there, and when you talk their language, when you talk our language of science, all of a sudden all the politics disappears. There are no Republican and Democrat children in the United States. These are children. And so when you talk about what's best for them, when you talk about outcomes and adverse events and how we can streamline the review process so we can deliver more cures and meaningful treatments in a way that's more efficient, that's exciting. You know, the FDA has been criticized in the past as being too rushed on some products and too slow on most other products. And so some people have asked me, you know, has it been in the past too fast or too slow? Well, it's been erratic. And the drug developers and markets like predictability, and that's what we're trying to provide. We announced last week we're going to release all of our decision letters. So if you're rejected, the public is going to see the logic, and other drug inventors and scientists are going to see why, and they're going to understand how the FDA thinks. We introduced AI across the agency for our reviewers. It is doing in days what would normally take weeks sometimes. One of the reviewers said it did in 6 minutes what would normally take them 2 to 3 weeks or 2 to 3 days. We're reducing animal testing. Turns out testing drugs on animals is not very predictive. 90% of drugs that pass toxicity on animals don't pass on safety and efficacy in humans. It's just not a very good model. So we're slowly replacing it with our new roadmap with computational modeling and testing the drugs on cell culture medium called organ-on-a-chip technology. That'll reduce the time. We want to cut all the waste in the process because we've got to ask a big question that really hasn't been asked before, and that is, why does it take over 10 years for a drug to come to market? Do we really think if you have the cure for breast cancer, we should just tell women, you know, give it another 10 years, maybe we can speed it up to 6? We've got to challenge a lot of deeply held assumptions. So we're doing that by streamlining, and we have a very focused goal, and that is to deliver more cures for the American people, more meaningful treatments and diagnostics, and healthier food for children, which is a big priority of our secretary.
I think the point you made about the staff and the scientists is an important one. MAGA talks a lot about the deep state. I will not ask you to comment on the politics of that, but I think what you're telling me is that there is not a deep state at the FDA, which I think some people would find hard to believe.
I think what we walked into at the FDA was an administrative agency that represented some of the bloat in government, 12 different travel offices within the FDA, dozens of people with chief strategy officer in their title or chief strategist. We had nearly 1,000 IT individuals because the FDA was a bunch of centers that were fiefdoms. They were empire kingdoms that were built by individuals. There was little accountability to Congress. They had their own revenue stream from the drug companies and from the manufacturers. And they had their own lobbyists to the Hill. They had their own communication staff, their own lawyers, their own IT, their own travel offices. And you had all these fiefdoms. So what was done just before I got there and what we've built on is a consolidation of services. And so we have resized the FDA, and where it hasn't worked, we've tried to fix it. I've been very on the ground and operational in my time. I've not been, going to receptions. I do very few public events like this or external meetings with pharma companies. We meet with some of the groups and trade groups, but otherwise, we've been on the ground. Some of my staff are here. We've been on the ground, operational, asking every scientist and inspector and law enforcement officer that we have at the FDA, what do you need to do your job better? And so that's been the focus in the first 100 days.
Part of the FDA should be completely nonpartisan, right? Being healthy is something, and finding cures and giving Americans longer life and healthier life and happier life should be something that everyone should be able to get behind. Have you found interest across the aisle in these reforms? Have you found roadblocks put up? Especially, I know you're talking about hormone therapy. There's a number of sort of old school things that you are questioning. How do you find the reception to that?
Yeah, by and large, it's good. It's sort of like at the FAA, when you are talking about safety, that is its own lexicon with its own science and vocabulary. And when you are talking about what it takes to make the aviation system safer in the United States, there's literally nothing partisan about it. And so that's what we're doing right now with our goals, to cut the waste, streamline the process, and deliver a cure or meaningful treatment for Alzheimer's or ALS or other neurodegenerative diseases. One of the cool things, Leland, is you get to see in this job what's in the pipeline. And it's exciting, but we don't want waste and red tape and idle time to slow down the potential delivery of a meaningful treatment for PTSD for veterans. We lose more veterans each year to suicide than we lost in the entire Iraq War. I know you've spent time in the Middle East. The war is over, and yet our boys are still dying. We owe it to them to get a decision on meaningful potential treatments for PTSD. It's one of our top priorities. In my background was in islet transplantation. I'd like to see a cure for type 1 diabetes. There's some potentially promising stuff out there. And we'd like to see a universal flu shot. So we're not guessing every year and you come in every year. There are flu shots that are proposed to be long-term shots that give efficacy to a variety of strains, including bird flu, something we're tracking closely. I'd like to see a cure for some types of stage 4 cancer. There are some potentially promising treatments that have melted GI cancers to nothing, no detectable cancer. Without chemo or radiation or surgery, what that could do to our healthcare costs in the United States is potentially dramatic. So these are some of our priorities. We're not wasting any time. We're going to keep going. We've got the AI for our scientific reviewers, and we just announced a new priority pathway pilot by which we're going to get an answer in weeks instead of nearly a year at the end of the process, and that we're going to do that by cutting the idle time, because during a phase 3 clinical trial, everyone's just sitting around waiting for the results. Well, we want to use that idle time to review the manufacturing and the inspecting and the draft labels and all the stuff, the lion's share of the application, so when the clinical trial endpoints report out, we can say, that trial is positive, it's significant, let's go. And
wow.
So we're trying new things.
So you're 100 days in. Your term could last until the end of this administration. Give me specifics of what changes. I know we've talked about drug review right now, but what would you like to see change measurably for Americans' consumption, habits, healthcare that would make your term a success?
Well, look, I'd love to see our entire healthcare establishment in the United States, for the first time, get serious about the root causes of all these diseases we're treating and medicating at scale. And no one has really been talking about that. The culture of academic medicine in the United States has been defined by the culture of the NIH over the last 30, 40 years, which has essentially been the Francis Collins culture mindset that the gene is responsible for most of our problems and the gene can solve most of our problems. And while we need to do work on genetics, and we have a very robust gene editing and rare disease program at the FDA, 40% of American kids don't have a chronic disease because they're bad. This is not a willpower problem. 31% of kids have insulin resistance or prediabetes or diabetes. It's not their fault. And no one has been talking about the fact that 70% of the food we as adults put in front of our nation's kids is ultra processed, with over 1,000 chemicals banned in Europe. So we have taken action to ban all 9, or to take an action to remove all 9 petroleum-based food dyes. And on Monday, I had some ice cream without artificial petroleum-based food dyes for National Ice Cream Day.
Does it taste as good?
It tasted just as delicious. I'm not promoting the product, but it was delicious. And we have all these companies, General Mills, Nestle, Kraft Heinz, they all stood up. People said, oh, you're not actually doing a regulatory ban. Well, you win more bees with honey than fire. And they are stepping up, and we're going to keep going. The maker of...
Has it surprised you how many food companies, it surprised me, has it surprised you how many food companies have voluntarily moved on this?
And right away. I mean,
Why?
right away. And some of them ahead of our schedule. Because I think, look, Republican, Democrat, and independent moms showed up in high numbers to vote for President Trump over this very issue that Secretary Kennedy championed. They love this. They love the idea of getting at the root causes of why kids are sick. Petroleum-based dyes have been implicated in an attention deficit disorder. We have a randomized controlled trial published in The Lancet. We have parents that say when they eliminate it, the child's behavior improves. That is a data point, okay? Medical establishment discards that. Oh, it's not a randomized 10-year trial. Well, we have enough data. Why are we taking risks and gambling with our nation's kids? We have an epidemic of ADHD, and what are we doing? We're ignoring the root causes and drugging our nation's kids at scale. We need to talk about school lunch programs, not just putting every 6-year-old on Ozempic. We got to talk about environmental exposures and food chemicals that may cause cancer, not just the chemo to treat it. We're good at proton beam therapy and gene editing and the complicated transplant operations I did at Johns Hopkins for my career, but we don't even for a second ask, why are sperm counts down 50% over the last 60 years? Why are GI cancers going up in young people? Could it be that the GI system is the interface with all of the dietary exposures that kids have? So we've got to challenge deeply held assumptions. Food is a massive priority at the FDA under my time there, and people think it's just a drug regulatory agency. It's not. The FDA regulates 20% of the US economy, and we are focused on healthy food for children.
I think my wife is now going to take out all artificial dyes from my diet based on the ADHD comment. Yeah. So let's get personal for a second.
Yeah.
What changes have you made to your diet, your lifestyle, say over the past 100 days now that you've gotten a chance to look under the hood?
Look, I think about Ansel Keys almost every day. He is the doctor who in the 1960s created the dogma that saturated fat caused heart disease, even though 3 giant large studies failed to support that association following his campaign. That was the basis of our food pyramid, is his dogma that saturated fat was bad, and it didn't matter how you got your grains, it was grains, grains, grains. Well, we now recognize you need more protein than the dietary guidelines had probably suggested. It matters what types of grains. If you're stripping them of fiber and chopping it up, you've got a high glycemic index. It's functioning as sugar in your body. So we ignored the role of refined carbohydrates. We're rewriting the food guidelines right now. It's not.
So the pyramid's changing.
The pyramid is going to change. We're rewriting them right now with USDA, and you're going to see an end of the 70-year demonization of natural saturated fat in the United States. You're going to see a discussion of refined carbohydrates and ultra-processed foods and other things, and finally, an honest conversation about our protein requirements. You're not getting good protein when people are eating the modern diet.
One of the great successes in healthcare in America has been, I don't want to say the elimination, but the massive decrease in the amount of people smoking. And yet, and this is true, a very influential MAHA person recently sent me a package, an entire box of nicotine gum, and said, this is the new health drug. This is what everyone should be taking because it is somehow the next caffeine. Are we moving backwards because of what? Influencers good marketing? How did nicotine suddenly become healthy?
Well, it is the, it is the combustible components of cigarettes that are where the health concerns come from. So people are now asking, is nicotine alone have the same health concerns? And I think the research in that space is in its infancy, but we do know that the lion's share of the harm of combustible cigarettes is in the combustible components of that cigarette. So there it is. The data are pretty clear right now that nicotine delivery without the combustible components has less harm than a combustible cigarette.
That seems obvious, right, that you're not inhaling the smoke. But you
Yeah.
think about Zyn nicotine pouches went from 75 million in 2023, this is Philip Morris numbers, to 200 million in 2025. That's Zyn. That doesn't count Alp, that doesn't count nicotine gum, that doesn't count vape pens, everything else. How do we explain that? Let me ask it this way. Is there a possible medical explanation that America's young adults up to yours age and my age suddenly getting hooked on nicotine is a good thing?
Well, I think for smokers, it's a safer alternative.
Sure.
So we have now, where smoking is down at all-time lows, but still 30 million Americans smoke. Our concern, and look, we'll let the research play out and the public will take that information, and I believe in a free country, and people will take that information and digest it as the medical establishment churns it out. But my concern right now is that we have illegal Chinese vaping products that children are using to start for the first time consuming a nicotine product. It's not a transition from cigarettes, but we do have kids in the United States now who try vaping, they're addicted to vaping. It's on these Chinese illegal products with these cutesy, fruity flavors, and they are addicted. Some of them know they're addicted. They come from good families, and they want to stop, and they can't stop. And this is a real problem in the United States. So we are undertaking a massive effort to stop the illegal products from coming in and to address our Chinese vaping problem that in some schools, I mean, it is bad. The companies in China, by the way, these products, these illegal products with the cutesy flavors and the sometimes a video game is the device, so the vaping device has a video game component, so the kid's addicted to the video game, clearly predatory. They show up in our ports. And what we learned has been going on is disgusting, and that is we were saying, oh, this is illegal because technically they're banned in China. So therefore, under this clause, 80, I forget the exact regulation number, we can reject it, we deny it, we shall refuse is the term in the regulation. We put it back on a ship to send it back to China. Well, they just take it to the next port. It's called port shopping, so 100% is coming in, it's totally porous, and they're laughing at us. And so we are addressing that with Customs and Border Protection and with the DOJ. And it's not just illegal vaping products where they're laughing at us. Foreign pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities that our FDA inspectors visit, we've got offices in 50 countries around the world, they have scheduled visits, and in the US, they're surprise visits. Well, scheduled visit is no inspection. I mean, they're laughing at us, so we're gonna go to surprise inspection. So there's a lot I'm learning about the sort of calcified way in which things have been done that we're going to change up.
You call it a calcified way that things have been done, but at the beginning of our conversation, you said that there's been complete acceptance and excitement over all of your changes. How do you square that for me?
Look, I think in any organization, there's going to be a broad range of responses. I think the majority of folks that I talk to, and again, we're on the ground, we're operational, we're not sort of ruling from an insulated ivory tower. We are on the ground. I am there essentially every day. My team here, when we're done off stage, we're going straight back up to our campus in Silver Spring. And we sit down and we talk to people. What have you always wanted to do here that you've never been able to do? What big ideas do you have? We're not interested in, the stapler should go over here in the mailroom. We're interested in the giant, big, bold ideas. And we're going to do stuff. And I think we've demonstrated that we're willing to do big things, from the petroleum-based food dyes to the AI to the...
You've been surprised how quickly it's happened?
I am. I just assume government, and people say government, it's very hard to work in government. I've just been very impressed with the staff at the FDA, and they've got a lot of pride in the brand. It's one of the greatest brands in the world. The FDA is one of the greatest brands in the world. So I want to see us regain our status as the world leader in life sciences and in regulation of medicine, of medical products. Right now, China has been going like this. I mean, like almost 30% of phase 1 trials are being done in China. We have to ask why. American companies are going to Australia for their preclinical and INDs. I want to see American companies thrive, and I want to see companies that do business in the United States thrive. I want to see the domestic manufacturing of drugs so we're not dependent on these other countries. It's a national security issue, so we're creating incentives now for manufacturing in the United States. And I'd like to see more affordability of drugs. It's a huge priority for President Trump. You saw the most favored nation status call, and we're going to be issuing these priority vouchers in part to companies that promise to equalize their prices and end the great American ripoff, with these same drugs being a third or a quarter or a tenth the price in London or Berlin or in Paris. That's a huge priority for this president.
Dr. Makary, thank you very much. Great lead-off guest. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice. Thank you. Thank you.
We'll let you get back to work.
Great. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Great to see you, Leo.